an exciting morning? It's always fun to hear Sammy early in the morning. Nice and chipper. All right, so my name's Tim Mangan. Company's TMurgent Technology. I do a bunch of stuff. Sometimes it's actually work. This is the wrong deck. Oh my goodness. I can't show you this deck yet. And, oh, there's my big X over there. Let's try the right deck. Because you came here to hear all about the package support framework, right? Awesome. Awesome. If I learn how to double click, we'll have something here soon. There we go. All right. Inside the Psf. Yeah, I'm Tim Mangan. I do some stuff. All right. So 19 years ago, I started out to build this new platform at a company called Softricity, became SoftGrid, later became App-V. At the time, we had kind of a weird situation for us. And when you want to create something that big, it takes a lot of effort, and you can go about it in different ways. And what we chose to do is we had some investors that had a whole bunch of money and very little patience. So they told us we had to build it as quickly as possible. We don't care how much money you spend, just get it done. So we looked at the whole big thing we wanted to do. We listened to their time frame and said, can't do that. So we narrowed it down. So we started with something, and our approach was to do something semi-narrow, but make sure that we went really deep into the technology and covered everything. And then over time, we'd be able to build it out. And that's kind of the way that App-V was built, or SoftGrid, the original. Microsoft, with MSIX, faces the same kind of challenges, but they have different constraints of how they do it. So what they've chosen to do is they've chosen to start a little bit narrow with an idea that they're going to widen out. But the main MSIX runtime, they chose not to go very deep. And it is intentionally. And the way that they extend in the deep direction was to add the package support framework. That provides the ability to get more and more things done and working in the environment. So that's why we're going to need to use the Psf as we use MSIX. So the MSIX runtime does a level of redirections for us. It does all of the VFS-style layering like we were used to in App-V, so that an application can ask for something like C, Windows, System32, I want this DLL, but it's actually going to live somewhere else on the system because that's part of our package. And that's the way the VFS layering works. Now, they did make some weird choices in my mind in that they decided not to layer VSF app data, so the app data roaming, and the app data local folders. It actually conflicts with the way the runtime works, and they don't redirect those. In fact, if you capture a package because you're doing your packaging efforts, and you have your settings and data inside those folders, by default, without the Psf, the application will not see those things. Okay? There may have been some ideas that application installers don't really do the configuration, end users do. So we don't need to bring that stuff over. I'm not quite sure. So we do have to deal with that stuff. Okay? So the package support framework is our rescue item. Microsoft makes it available in source code format up on GitHub. You can download it and build it. And how many of you have actually done that in this room? 1, 2. Come on, Pascal, I know you did, right? No? Okay. Only 2 hands, yeah. Okay, that's about what I expected, right? That's not what IT pros do. You took a class in computer programming at some point in your career, and you decided, that's not the job I want, right? That's why you do what you do today. So they have this thing. It's available. It's based on something called Detours, and we'll talk about both of those today. Now, I did a whole bunch of testing last year. I produced a white paper called the Report Card on MSIX. It came out last January. I'm working on a new one this year. I've kind of extended the testing a little bit, and this is a sneak preview of some of the pre-testing that I did. So what I found last year was about 22% of my applications were of the type that if I package them up just using the MSIX without the Psf, I was able to get them into a condition that most all enterprises would accept them for production. So if you had that app natively today or through App-V and you were going to try to deploy it through production, you'd look at the MSIX on that other 80% and say, no, we'll stay the way we are, right? So I did a little further testing. So we've been working on the Psf and trying to extend it. And I thought that with the changes that I've put in place in the Psf, that we would probably this year end up around 35%. It turns out I was wrong. Because all of the problems that I looked at turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. So the problem I saw that we addressed was simply hiding the ones that were going to follow behind it. So we're really going to have some more work to do. Now, there's plenty more time before I do the next real set of testing, which will probably come out after the first of the year again this year. And I'll have all new tooling by then. We're going to have a new operating system. I'm sure we'll have new versions of the packaging tool. We'll probably have an opportunity to get some more things into the Psf. So I'm hoping that the numbers get a lot better, but I still think it's going to take more and more time. Okay. The primary causes of the things that I'm seeing as I test the applications are up here. We got a whole bunch of shortcut issues. Good news is we can take care of the shortcut issues. The Psf does a great job of that. The changes that I put in that actually ended up in the Psf last February really address all of those issues. We also have some problems with Dll Locate Ability. The shortcut problem takes care of about half of them, but if the application was using the path variable or app paths to find its DLLs, we're not getting that support yet, and we have to fix it. There's at least one vendor that does have a fix for the app path thing, which is great, which means we know we can do it without too much trouble. The settings and data issues, the Psf is doing a pretty good job on a lot of these things for us. What we don't have right now in the Psf is the registry pieces, though. So if you have an application that tries to write to HKey local machine, ain't gonna work. If you have an application that wants to write to HKey current user, but unfortunately, the developer was lazy, and rather than ask for read-write access, they asked for full access, which includes delete access. They get an access denied, and they're not allowed to write those changes. So we don't have solutions to those two things yet, and that's probably the biggest thing I want to see getting into the Psf going forward. Post-deployment configuration issues. Fortunately, the Psf has recently gotten scripting added into the package. So we are now able to do a form of scripting. That scripting is going to be start of application, end of application style scripting. It's not a deployment type of script, which means you have to build in the logic to see, have I already done this? But we're getting there, and we'll be able to do those types of activities as well. Okay. So how the Psf works? Well, we have to use this launcher thing. Okay. So the launcher program helps set everything up. It uses Detours. Detours is a library that helps someone write Windows API intercepts. It's actually not just Windows API. You can intercept any DLL function. You just have to know what its name is and what its signature looks like, and we can very easily write an intercept that allows us to modify the behavior of what happens when the application calls through that API. So what we're primarily doing with the Psf right now is we're intercepting file and registry calls, mostly file at this point, and we're modifying what the application asks for. Largely what we're doing in the case of files, we're doing what we refer to as copy on access. Those of you who are familiar with App-V are familiar with how it does copy on write. It's not a copy on write, unfortunately, it's a copy on access, which means we'll get more things from our package redirected into the local cache for the application, but it gets the job done, so it's fine. So I mentioned Detours is an open source project. It's the technology used for App-V, for Microsoft UEV. And I'm pretty sure Microsoft sold Detours before they open sourced it to a bunch of other vendors that are probably doing UEV-like products. I wouldn't be surprised if something like an AppSense or something uses it, but I don't really know. So this is a logic of a typical function intercept, right? So we can use it to do a bunch of things. So one of the things we can do is we can just use it to trace. So we can see what activity the application was trying to do. You think about something like Psf Monitor, you get a trace, but that Psf Monitor is happening down in the kernel after the MSIS runtime has already made some modifications. So by doing this tracing up at the level of the application, we can see exactly what the application was asking for, and it makes it easier for us to do the workaround to have the PSF make changes. So we can do tracing. We can also modify the requests that come in. So for example, if the application asked for that file that was in the app data local folder of our package, the MSIS runtime won't find it, but we can find it and say, hey, let's go look over here instead. Oh, look, there it is. Let's give it to the application. Okay. We're just going to skip right through that. We don't have enough time for that. I thought I had an hour. We have 45 minutes, so. All right. When we want to have these types of intercepts put in, we have to do what's called Dll Injection. That's what that last slide was about, is a technique to do it. You don't need to know the details, but basically what we need is a privileged process that has the ability to inject the DLL into another process. And there's different ways to do that. We can do it inside a Windows service. The App-V client does that. The App-V client Windows service does DLL injection into all of the App-V applications with a DLL called App-V and Subsystem 32, and that's responsible for wonders like copy on write, GUID spoofing, named object spoofing, and something else. There's a fourth finger I forgot. All right. We can also have out-of-process COM objects. Citrix loves to do DLL injection through out-of-process COM objects. That's their primary way of doing it. But we can also use elevated processes or a parent process, and that's what MSIX does. We use a thing called Psf Launcher from the Psf, and we change all of the entry points to our package, the shortcuts, the file associations, et cetera. And we say, don't go to the real thing. Go to this launcher, and then we'll configure the launcher to do the things that we want and start up the process. Okay. All right. So if you think about having your shortcut, it points to a target application. When we bring in the Psf, it works like this. So we have a different shortcut. It's going to point to Psf Launcher. It'll be Psf Launcher 32 or 64-bit, depending on the bitness of the target application. It's going to load a DLL called Psf Runtime 32 or 64, and that's going to read this configuration file called config.json. Now, I don't know why it's a JSON file. It's just a file in your package. There's no networking things. You're not going to the internet. Should have been XML in my book, but it's JSON. Okay, so it reads the JSON file. There's two big sections. There's one at the top called applications, one at the bottom called processes. At this point, for the Psf launcher, it's going to read the top part. And that's going to say, hey, for my particular Psf launcher, here's what you're supposed to do. And here's what you're supposed to do can be, I want to do the scripting stuff. I want to run a monitor trace that we can do, or I want to launch, I shouldn't say or, and I want to launch this target application. Reads that information, starts up the process, injects a copy of Psf runtime into that target process. That copy of Psf runtime also reads the JSON file, but looking for the bottom section, it says, okay, for my name process, what am I supposed to do? And it'll see information that says, well, you're supposed to load file redirection fixup.dll, and then file redirection fixup will read the other data that's in the config.json file that says how it's supposed to be configured. So that's the basic process of the way this whole thing works. What that means is that if you think about recapturing a package and putting it into MSIX, after you get your application in, you need to get the Psf launcher, the Psf runtime, the DLL, and the config.json in your package. And currently with the Psf, you have to have the config.json file at the root of the package folder. Okay. So the kind of things that we can do with the Psf today, all of these startup shortcut issues. Turns out that Windows 10 applications, the start tile things, they do not have command line arguments. Who knew, right? The apps, the UWP apps, they just don't use that. We also can't have a working directory specified, at least not today. That might change over time, but right now we can't. The current working directory of every UWP and MSIX app, unless otherwise directed, will be the Windows System 32 folder. You have an exe, they drop some DLLs in that folder, oops, don't see them. So we got to fix that. So we can do that. We can do the scripting stuff in there. We can put in the trace along with a tool that I added to the Psf called Psf Monitor. And then the file redirection fix-up really is our friend today. That's the one biggie we're using. I'm hoping we can get a registry fix-up. There's another thing called an Electron fix-up. As far as I know, it's just for developers developing what's called Electron apps. And they're going to use that in building their packages that they release to you in MSIX format. But I'm hoping that we don't ever have to touch that stuff ourselves on that one. Right? And by the way, when we get to the point, or if we get to the point, I don't know. Let's go when. When we get to the point that the ISVs start delivering applications out in MSIX format. If they give you a choice between MSI and MSIX, you should be picking the MSIX. Okay? In the long run, this is going to make your systems more stable. It's going to be easier for you to work with. The repackaging effort on those is just going to be creating a modification package with your changes that you want to make in terms of configuration. It'll be more like building an MST as opposed to repackaging something. So you will want to go there when they make those available, because those apps are going to work really well. You're not going to have to worry about the Psf, because either they included it in their package or they rewrote their code so they didn't need it. But it won't be your worry anymore. Okay. All right. As I teach people packaging in our classes, one of the big things I try to get them to understand is the importance of knowing your applications. The IT department, who is responsible for delivering these applications, usually doesn't have enough knowledge or time to figure out how these applications work. And when I do that, I always build from the Windows API. How does the application expose itself? What are the interfaces to the operating system, to the user? Because those are the things that break. And if we understand what those things are up front, it can be very helpful to us. And of course, where does it put its settings and data? Now, I have a tendency to recommend to folks to use App-V to find that out. And people who don't use App-V are like, why would you tell them to package it up in App-V to go to MSIX? That makes absolutely no sense. And yes, in that sense it doesn't. But what we have in App-V today is some really good tooling that makes it easy for us to know our app. So the application could put data in all sorts of weird places depending on how old the application is. We need to understand that stuff. And we need to understand the other places that it touches Windows. So a little case study, application Notepad++, right? We all know that app, a little XML editor. There's 3 issues with it in MSIX. Number 1, it puts its configuration into the user's app data roaming file. One of the key pieces of that configuration is its auto-updater setting. So if you package that up without the Psf, that data gets ignored. So when it gets out to the client, the first time they run it, the application will recreate the default settings and put them down on disk. And about 15 days later, they'll get a notification, there's a new version for you. If they download it, and run it, and therefore have the admin rights to be able to run it, they'll now have an MSIX package of the old version and an MSI version of the new one. Not the behavior we want. We need to get rid of that. So we have to fix it, and we use the Psf for that. It also allows them to put DLLs in the app data roaming folder. Really horrible application behavior. No application should be putting executable components in the user's app data local or app data roaming folder. But I see vendors do that. Google does it. AutoCAD does it. WinZip does it. And yes, the people who build Notepad++, Microsoft does it. So it happens, okay? Let me try the other button. That one works better. Okay, so I packaged this up in App-V. This app works great. The only thing I have to remember is that when I'm doing App-V, I have to turn on the feature that says to allow the VFS rights so that the end user can modify the configuration after I deliver to them. But once I do that, the app gets 100% full fidelity, the same thing you would get with a native install. Some of the things that we can see as we analyze this application, it's just got a single shortcut. It has one file association to the wildcard character, so that anytime you right-click on any file on the system after it's installed, you should see an extra menu that shows up, a context menu that says Edit in Notepad++. It does use AppPath, but it's not using AppPath to find its DLLs. It's only for the Windows 10 search feature. And while I care about that in App-V, I want to make sure that that supported the search feature in there. In the case of MSIX, I don't have to worry about it because they put the cached copy of your program under C program files packages as opposed to the C program data where App-V has it. And that because of it not being in the program files, the AppPath search doesn't work unless we actually specify it in the registry of the package. So I'm okay without that if it doesn't work right now, which is okay. So this is one of the reasons I say I want to take this and bring it into App-V. Because after we bring it into App-V, we just create a package. It doesn't even matter if the package works. We're just going to do a capture, get it in App-V format for the sole purpose of running this tool. So this is a free tool of mine called App-V Manage. And it analyzes that captured result and exposes out all of these APIs so we can look at it. All this stuff on the left here are the major API portions that I'm worried about. Right? So from this, I can see, okay, I got an application, I got a shortcut, I got a file type association, I have a shell extension, a little bit of common there, there's an app path. All right, there's no services, that's good, because I don't have services in MSIX yet. But I can go in and I can see the details on those. And that tells me what I need to worry about for my MSIX packaging. Right? I can go view the virtual files and I can see, oh, there are some things under app data local or app data roaming. I need the file redirection fix up, so I can see those things. All right, so those are the kind of things I'm looking for. And I can go in detail, so I can see actually the shell extension is a context menu handler, and it's up against the asterisk, so for all files. Now, not only do I know that it's there, I might need to worry about it, I also know features that I need to test after I've packaged it up. Right? I can see the shell extension. I can see if it integrates to Office. I can see if it's got plugins for Internet Explorer. Right? These things show up, and sometimes you're not even aware of them. So we want to know about it before we try to finish off the job of polishing this package off to send it out to test and out to production. Okay. All right, so defeating the updater. I actually do a little extra trick on Notepad++, right? So you can go to the GUI of Notepad++ after you've installed it. You go to the Settings, Preferences, the Miscellaneous tab, and there's a checkbox that says, turn off the auto-update. And that's okay. And if I use a PSF, the application will see it with the file redirection fix-up. But the user could go in and undo that again. So I have a little different way of doing that. Okay, this is just an example of their settings dialog. So typically, there are some things in here that IT wants to set to try to make it more efficient for our end users so that they don't have to be experts in Notepad++. We can send that package out with the settings that they're most likely to want to have. And so for my example, I like to just set the show status bar so I can just see that what file is being used, right? And there's the other checkbox I want to get to undo the updater. Although, as I said, I do it a little differently. What I do is I just leave that checkbox on, save off my settings, and then I find the XML file. So it's an XML file that gets put into the user's profile. And instead of changing the no to a yes that says to not, or actually the yes to a no, what I do is they have a next update. So when this thing got created, it looked at today's date, it added 15 days and put a timestamp in there and said, that's the next time I'll go check updates. I just set it to 2025. Now the end user can click that checkbox all they want and it isn't going to matter because it's still not going to look until 2025. So I think I'm okay. Know your app. All right. So I packaged this up using without the PSF. So this is a test I did last January. And the things that we would see is that none of the configuration we put in the package would be seen. The end user, after 15 days, would get those updates, and bad things happen, right? Okay. So I add the PSF in. Oh, yeah, and this is kind of the install experience. If you're not pushing it out through something like Configuration Manager, and you just go and double-click on the package, what I should see is I get the thing, I should see the icon of the application up there, right? And after I install it, I should have a shortcut on the Start menu. I should actually not call it shortcut. I should have a tile on the Start menu. I'm trying to use the right words for these modern apps. It's really, really hard. All right, I have a tile, and I should have the icon along with the name. Okay. I should see that checkbox, though. I don't see it. All right, fine. So one of the things that I can do is I can now take the process, now that I've seen I have this problem, and I can put in the trace. So I inject the PSF, and I'll show you how I do that a little bit. And I inject the trace shim along with this tool called Psf Monitor, which is also part of the PSF now. So Psf Monitor is a GUI tool. If you think about Procmon, it's kind of that Procmon-like experience for looking at that data. And I can see this particular case, the application made a single call looking to open this particular file inside the package. I actually see three trace items in here. The reason I see three trace items is that we are monitoring both at the level of create file as well as the level of NT create file. So as the application calls, if it's a Win32 style application, the application does a file open, it calls create file, and then create file calls NT create file. So why do I trace them both ways? Because if it's a .NET application, the .NET application never calls create file. It calls NT create file. Right? So that's why I'm tracing it both. We can turn some of those on and off as we want to, but that's what we're seeing here. And then we'll see some weird activities, like create file called NT create file, but the first call it made failed. And then it called again and it worked. Not quite sure why, but I think Microsoft did something here, and they just changed the request a little bit, and then it worked. Okay, and that's just the pattern I've learned to live with, understand, okay, that's all that means. I don't have to worry about it. All right. So I have yet another tool. It's called Psf Tooling. Now, Psf Tooling is designed to work with the Microsoft packaging tool. Actually, any packaging tool where you're in a monitoring mode, you could use it for. Most likely you'd use it with the Microsoft packaging tool because the other tooling vendors, the guys at Flexera, the guys at Advanced Installer, the guys at Raynet, they're including the PSF in their packaging already directory. Microsoft packaging tool does not. This is your easy method to get it in. You no longer have to download and build your own PSF because I have binaries for the PSF in the tool. This is an app you can get from the Microsoft Store. It's free. That's the same place you got to get the packaging tool from, so it's not too hard to find it. And it will help you bring the PSF in place. I'll show you a demo of that coming up. In fact, I'm going to show you a demo right now, as it turns out. All right. Okay, so we're actually going to go through the packaging of an app, and I'm thinking it's probably Notepad++. Okay, so we're going to start with the packaging tool, and we're going to create a new application package. I usually skip everything there. I got my signature information already configured in the packaging tool, so it knows my cert. I have to give it a name, and oh, by the way, the name cannot use underscores. Can't use special characters other than maybe the dash. But I can give it a nice display name, and I usually like the syntax. I'll say the vendor and then packaged by me for that field, because I don't really want to say it's just me. All right, so when I package up and I'm not using the PSF, there's this installation folder field here, okay? Now, I've heard Microsoft say that the best practice is to fill in the path that you're going to install in there. That would follow the recommendations in App-V of a PVAD style install rather than the VFS. Although I've noticed carefully, every demo I've seen a Microsoft employee do of packaging with this tool, they never fill it in. So, not sure. My take is it doesn't matter either way right now, unless you're using the PSF. You have to fill this field in, because that's the only way we know where to put the config.json file. Okay? So you have to fill it in, and the folder you reference here has to exist before you leave this dialog. So you have to create the folder and point to it. So in this case, we're just going to create the Notepad++ folder under, you get out of the window? I got out of the window. There we go. We'll create the Notepad++ folder right under Program Files. And we'll start the process. It's going to check to see, it's got to get the driver in place. It's going to make sure I got all those other weird things like Windows Update and stuff turned off. If not, it'll shut them down for me. And then as soon as I hit next, we go, okay, we're in the monitoring mode. I'm going to go ahead and do the install. I've got a scripted install using a PowerShell thing I have also up on my website that's free called Passive Install that helps you write scripts for installing and configuring stuff like this. So you have fewer lines to write. So it's going to do its thing. It elevated. Now it's going to, okay, now it's doing the NGen QFlush, which I always like to do in my package. That's all the things that it did, right? And now that I'm done with the main install, I'm going to go to that Psf tool. Ooh, I clicked too low. I hate it when that happens. I hate it when that happens because I set that up and now I have to do this and do this and drag my mouse to get back to where we were. You're not showing me the bar. Okay, so I'll talk about it until it gets there. How's that? All right, so the Psf tooling, so this is extra executable. It's an MSIX package, so it doesn't dirty my environment and put down additional dependencies. And what we'll do is we'll start it up. One of the things the tool has to do is it also has to know where that install folder is. And the packaging tool has no way to tell me that, so I guess at it. So I'll take a look at the program files x64, and the root of C, and look for a folder that was created in the last hour. And if I find it, it will end up appearing at the top of the screen in the dialog when it shows up. If it doesn't find it, that'll be red to hint to use, hey, tell me where you really installed this thing to. After that, we will go to a wizard. So you'll see us use the shortcut wizard here, and we'll configure the things we want Psf to do. It will investigate the bitness of the executable of the target of our shortcut. It will rewrite the shortcut because we're still in monitoring mode. So all the packaging tool cares is what did the shortcut look like at the end when you told me you were done. So I'll modify that to do that injection and have it point to the Psf Launcher. And then configure the JSON based on the settings that we picked. When you have gotten anything configured, we'll say, yes, go ahead and do it. And it will copy all of the files in place. It'll modify the shortcut. And in this latest version that I haven't yet released, it will also fix up the icon. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Because with the version that I have out on the store right now, Psf Launcher becomes the target of our shortcut. And it has no icons. So we end up with this blue blank square every time we publish these apps out when we bring the Psf in. And it really pissed me off, so I sat down one day and figured out how to solve that problem. And so now I extract the icon out of your original thing, and I actually inject it as a resource into that copy of Psf Launcher so that it has the right icon, and the Microsoft packaging tool does the right thing. Okay, so here we are. We're in the wizard, right? So the wizard is, let me get my mouse there so it does right this time. Okay. So the wizard is going to inject the Psf launch. It's going to force the current working directory to be the folder of the exe to take care of DLL finding if anything's in there. And I told it to fix up the icon and inject the file redirection, fix up DLL. Once I selected that last one, then this bottom, now what did I do? Good. The bottom box shows up, and that's the configuration for the fix-up itself. So the fix-up allows to work in several areas. I know I need to add the app data roaming, right? So that gets me the copy and access for the app data roaming, so the app can see its configurations. But also, I'm doing some other things in the general area, just in case the application tried to write something in the program files area, that would be taken care of. And I want to make sure that I exclude standard things I probably don't want to do that to, which would be things like EXEs, DLLs, COM objects, things like that. So I just have an exclusion list that's brought in. When we're done, we would actually then go pick the shortcut. And then we'll see how it will modify that shortcut on the screen here. Okay, so it's going to change the name of the program. I'm making up a number because one of the problems we have is that you can't have two shortcuts to the same EXE. So if I had multiple shortcuts in my package, I want to make sure that everyone has a unique name. So I take a copy of Psf Launcher, and the first one's going to be 1, second one's going to be 2, etc. We change the working directory if necessary. Actually, we wouldn't in this case. And the original app didn't ask for an icon. Now, it turns out the packaging tool won't use this icon location today, but I try to fix it up that way so that if they ever do fix it, we won't need the other fix that I'm doing. We're not going to go sit through that again, that's for sure. All right, so at the end of that, it's amazing when plans go to waste. I should not have had that in my hand. All right. So at the end of that, we would actually be able to see and further edit the config.json and then apply those changes. We'd finish off the package, and then everything would be wonderful once again. So before I put in the icon fix, this is kind of the way it worked, right? So I would get the package, and that's what my install looks like. I got a big blue square, and my shortcut also looks like that. Sorry, start tile, right? And so, but I got my setting there the way I wanted, and I don't get any updates. So that was wonderful. The new version, it actually does look like this again, and we get our start item to have the correct looking icon on the shortcut. So we're getting closer. We're getting closer. All right, and there we go, we got that. All right, so this is sort of a summary of Notepad++ in that case study of, would I be able to push this out into production? You know, and you know, if I didn't do any repackaging, I'd have that problem of the updater, right? If I just installed the MSI from the vendor, didn't try to configure it at all. So we always want to configure it somehow. So we're going to package it up. MSI packaging works great. App-V packaging works great. Without the PSF, not good, not good. You get the updates and none of the configuration. If we go with the PSF previously, we still had a problem with that icon, and now I think it really looks good. So this is the kind of activity that we're going to be doing over time to improve the compatibility of MSIX with these applications and try to make it easier for you to get these packages pushed out as we go forward. Okay. Yes? The first step? Yeah. Auto updates would happen. And the auto updates would happen, right? And you would be taking the default configuration from the vendor, which usually is almost never what you want, right? So those were the two reasons for that. Okay, so I mentioned that I'm going to have a new version of the white paper this year. I've done some preliminary testing with that. I'm working with more scenarios this year. Last year, I looked at just if I package these apps up in App-V, if I package them up with the packaging tool without the PSF. So I'm expanding the application list. I'll be repeating those tests, but I'm also going to include with the PSF now, with Advanced Installer and with Flexera. I think that's where I'll probably end up. There's only so much time in a day and so many vendors. But we'll get a decent checkpoint of where we are. But I also want to get some help from all of you because I want to expand the kind of information that we're getting. And so at the beginning of the month, we opened up 2 surveys. So we have a website called m6conf.com. So MSIX, M6, okay? All right. Couldn't get m6.com. They won't allow you to have 2-letter domains, so, okay. All right, anyway, we have that. There are two surveys. One is intended for developers that might be thinking about packaging up and releasing an MSIX format, and the other is for IT folks that are looking at the repackaging. And so we're trying to get an idea from you how you feel about all of this. And I got to tell you, as soon as I put this up, I got a whole bunch of folks from Microsoft saying, will you share with us the results, please? So they are very interested. And what will actually help the most is for us to get a lot of input into this. I think the more people that end up responding to this, the more important Microsoft will take that feedback. So this is your opportunity to provide Microsoft feedback directly and anonymously. There's a place you can put in your name so that you can get an email when the results are out, but you don't have to. I'm sure you'll see on Twitter that the results are out and you can go get the results, okay? So please do this, tell your friends. If you are someone that has a good public profile and has lots of followers, let them know and get them to do it as well. So I think that is, I've got some resources up on that slide because I know they're going to give you the slide decks. So I have 3 minutes and 51 seconds, to take questions. Oh, come on, it can't be that easy. All right, so how many of you have tried packaging with the Psf today? Okay, I saw a bunch of hands start to go up and then stop down. So how many of you have packaged without with or without the Psf then? Okay, a good chunk of the room. What have the rest of you been doing? Slacking off? Yeah, it'll be Microsoft and others, right? So unfortunately, getting submissions into the Psf is a little bit of a painful process. So I've actually done only about a third of what I would have thought I would have done in the last year because it just takes a lot of time and energy to actually get the submissions into the main build of the Psf. So it's taking longer than we had hoped, but you know, we'll get there eventually. Okay. Some of the changes that I have in works right now, there's this mission that went in April, and I think we're probably about 2 or 3 weeks away from that actually getting in the mainline source. But some of the fixes that are in there is that all of the redirection that MSIX does goes into the user's app data local folder. And that doesn't necessarily work for those non-persistent or semi-persistent scenarios, non-persistent VDI or something like a Zen app. So I've added in the ability for you to configure where that gets redirected to so that you can get it into the user's home drive. Now, when you get that, don't think that you can put it into the user's app data roaming folder because unfortunately, our fix-ups are here, MSIS runtime is down here, so the app says do this. I say, oh, go put it in app data roaming. MSIX says, oh, no, that goes into app data local over here. So you have to go to the home drive or a share, you know, something like that. Okay, well, with that, yes. Have released an MSIX format? That is a fantastic question. I'm happy to say that I have been the first, okay? And it was actually before last year's show. It was up in the store. I had an old tool of mine that just, it's my #1 download on my site. I wrote it in like 2002 or 3. It is this dummy little thing that provides you a very bad cloud connection. So it's just a network simulator. You can inject delays and errors. And that thing gets downloaded like 3,000 times a year from my site. I'm pretty sure it's college students. They've got some project and they want to use something like that. So I decided I'd take that and put it in an MSIX package as an experiment. Just learn, you know, I want to learn how we do this stuff. And then I work with Microsoft as a way, well, you need something up in the store, so we need a process to do that because it's not the same as a UWP process. So it took a while, but last October, that got up in the store. So I had the first. The Psf Tooling is the second. There might be other, there probably are others up in the store. You can't really search or see that they're MSIX when they're in the store. You'd have to actually download the thing and open it up and look in the internal manifest file to find out if it is. The MSIX packaging tool, incidentally, is not an MSIX package, unless they changed it and didn't tell me. I thought I saw them back there. Nope, their heads are still down. Okay, so it's a Centennial Lab, so it's close to MSIX, but not quite. I suspect there are some games that are probably released because they tend to be a little more leading edge. But the other vendors, we don't know. And that's one of the reasons we have the survey for the developers. I want to find out, are you thinking about this? Are you planning it this year? Right? Those are the kind of questions we're asking them. So hopefully in January, we'll have a little better feedback on that. The biggest problem is that my audience is mostly IT pro, and I'm trying to figure out how do we really get that audience to participate in the survey. Okay. So my time is up. Your lunch is ready. Thank you very much. I'm here all